Darren Rainey. On June 23, 2012, at Dade Correctional Institution in Florida, 50-year-old Darren Rainey was an inmate serving a short sentence for cocaine possession. Rainey had previously been diagnosed with schizophrenia and was housed in a mental health unit within the prison. On the night of June 23, Rainey defecated inside his cell. Correctional officers removed him and escorted him through the unit to a disciplinary shower area. The shower stall was small and closed and secured with a solid door. Rainey was ordered to enter the stall and the door was locked behind him. The water was turned on and left running. The temperature was not regulated. Inmates housed nearby later reported that the water was extremely hot. Shortly after being locked inside, Rainey began screaming and yelling that the water was burning him. He repeatedly begged to be let out. The screaming continued for an extended period while guards did not open the door. Rainey remained inside the shower stall for nearly 2 hours. Over time, his screams weakened and eventually stopped. When officers later opened the stall, Rainey was found unresponsive on the floor. His body showed extensive burns with large areas of blistered and peeling skin. Medical staff pronounced him dead at the scene. Following the death, civil lawsuits were filed and the incident underwent external review with findings confirming the cause of death as heat-related injuries sustained inside the shower. Terrill Thomas. In April 2016, at the Milwaukee County Jail in Wisconsin, 38-year-old Terrill Thomas was being held after his arrest. Thomas had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia prior to his incarceration. After an incident in which he flooded his cell, Thomas was moved into solitary confinement. As a disciplinary measure, correctional staff shut off the water supply to his cell, disabling the sink and toilet. He was left alone without access to running water. Over the following days, Thomas repeatedly asked officers for water. Jail surveillance footage later showed him approaching the cell door during welfare checks and speaking to guards. The water supply remained shut off and no drinking water was provided. Thomas remained in the cell for 7 days. During this time, he was given food but no water. His physical condition steadily deteriorated. On the 7th day, officers entered the cell and found Thomas collapsed on the floor and unresponsive. Medical personnel were called, but he was pronounced dead. An autopsy ruled the cause of death as severe dehydration. Investigators confirmed that the water had been deliberately shut off for the entire period. Following the investigation, criminal charges were filed against multiple jail employees, and Milwaukee County later reached financial settlements with Thomas's family. Tony Mitchell. In January 2023, at the Walker County Jail in Alabama, 33-year-old Tony Mitchell was being held in custody. Mitchell had documented mental health conditions noted in jail records. He was placed in a holding cell referred to by staff and inmates as the freezer, which was described as extremely cold. Reports stated that Mitchell was left inside the cell with little or no clothing and minimal bedding. Surveillance footage later showed Mitchell pacing inside the cell, shivering and attempting to keep warm. As time passed, his movements slowed. He eventually curled up on the floor and remained there for extended periods. Requests for medical attention were delayed. Mitchell's condition continued to worsen before he was finally removed from the cell and transported to a hospital. His body temperature was dangerously low upon arrival. Despite medical intervention, Tony Mitchell died shortly after reaching the hospital. Medical findings and subsequent investigations cited hypothermia and neglect as contributing factors. Following the incident, several jail employees were charged, and court records later showed plea agreements connected to the case. Lason Butler. In June 2022, at the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center in South Carolina, Lason Butler was being held in custody. Butler was placed in an isolation cell within the facility. According to later lawsuits and investigative reports, the cell lacked running water. The detention center had documented issues involving sanitation, pest infestation, and maintenance problems. Butler remained alone in the cell for an extended period. When officers eventually entered the cell, Butler was found dead. His body showed fresh bite marks. Investigators stated that the injuries were consistent with rat activity. Photographs taken at the scene documented both the condition of the cell and the wounds found on Butler's body. Medical examiners listed the cause of death as undetermined. The circumstances surrounding the lack of water, isolation, and presence of rodents became the subject of public reporting, and federal authorities later opened reviews into conditions at the facility. John Brennan Crutchley. In March 2002, at Florida State Prison in Florida, John Brennan Crutchley was an inmate serving multiple life sentences. Crutchley was housed alone in a maximum security cell and spent most of his time in isolation. Prison records indicated that he was not placed on suicide watch at the time and was being monitored under standard procedures for inmates in segregation. On the day of his death, correctional officers conducted routine security rounds along the cell block. When they arrived at Crutchley's cell, officers observed him lying motionless inside. He did not respond to verbal commands or visual checks. Officers entered the cell and discovered Crutchley unresponsive on the floor. A plastic bag was secured over his head, restricting airflow. The cell door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. A search of the cell showed no indication that another person had been present. John Brennan Crutchley was pronounced dead inside his cell. A formal investigation was conducted by prison officials. An autopsy later determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation. The manner of death was ruled a suicide. Andrew Holland. In January 2017, at the San Luis Obispo County Jail in California, 36-year-old Andrew Holland was taken into custody. Holland was booked into the county jail following his arrest and placed in a holding cell. Shortly after his arrival, he began displaying signs of severe psychological distress. He shouted loudly, paced inside the cell, and repeatedly struck the cell door with his hands and body. His behavior continued for an extended period and drew the attention of correctional staff. Officers responded by removing Holland from the cell. He was taken to another area of the jail and placed into a restraint chair. The chair was designed to immobilize the person seated in it. Multiple straps were applied to secure his arms, legs, shoulders, chest, and torso. Once restrained, Holland was unable to stand, lie down, or reposition his body in any meaningful way, and remained seated upright. Jail records and surveillance footage later show that Holland remained restrained in the chair for prolonged periods over the following 2 days. The total time he spent restrained was approximately 46 hours, with only brief interruptions. During this time, officers conducted periodic checks but did not remove the restraints for extended relief. As hours passed, Holland's physical activity decreased. His movements became slower and less frequent. His voice weakened, and his responses during checks became limited. He spent long stretches slumped forward or leaning back against the chair, with little visible motion. Eventually, Holland stopped responding altogether. When officers returned to check on him, they found him unresponsive while still seated in the restraint chair. Emergency procedures were initiated and medical personnel were called to the scene. Despite medical intervention, Andrew Holland was pronounced dead shortly afterward. Following his death, jail surveillance video, medical records, and internal logs were reviewed by outside agencies. The county later acknowledged failures related to monitoring, medical oversight, and restraint practices. Policy changes were subsequently announced, and the case became the subject of public reporting and official review.